It's a super low-budget way of creating a show. Creating a show from the standpoint of the audience members who watch the show. Daniel Hagen is composing an opera about a character titled The Messiah, who is composing an opera about the character Daniel Hagen, who was composing an opera about the character The Messiah. This way on the show they talk about the show in the sense that if you position two mirrors to face each other you will see repetition to infinity. By that, I mean many images of the same person and their mirror image but only one actual person. On the show, there are shows within shows to infinity. Within the show there's a real world and a show world, and within that show world there's a real world and a show world, and within that show world there's a real world and a show world. There are at least two functions for this. 1. The purpose is to have things happen on the show that could never happen for practical or budgetary reasons, such as a trip to the moon. Instead of going to the moon, I talk about how on the show they went to the moon. Even though the story came from the narrator and creator, it's still hearsay, and so is still hearsay even if it had actually happened. Whether you actually go to the moon or just tell a story about it, it comes across as a story anyway. 2. The purpose is so that I can talk about the real world and it's still within fantasy and can be a lie, which is to say, a story that is fictional. In this way the show is not only about the story that Daniel Hagen is telling you but is also the real-life things that happened during the production of the show. In this way it's sometimes a behind the scenes or the making of show where I show myself practicing scales or showcase unfinished works. Some of those real-life things are real, like the scales, but sometimes I may say that the Messiah was practicing their scales and they really weren't. Another example is the interlaced material where I am talking to my stalkers, which is when I am having lucid moments or real moments and talking between the material that is presented to the general public in the imaginary world. These moments are all copyright and we will be filing a lawsuit with the state of Wisconsin for allowing the illegal observation and subsequent sales and distribution of this content. The purpose of this is typically to convince the unseen people to report crimes and turn themselves in. It could also be to protect myself in the fictional world. In the show the creator and narrator, me, Daniel Hagen, may be in a real-life situation that would need them to talk about the real world, and this is still part of the dramatic show because it's a show about a guy making a show, but sometimes it's about his real life, which is still part of the overall fiction and should only be used for entertainment purposes. This way the show can be about talking about the show, which is a super low-budget way of creating a show. The show can also be about the real world, which is more realistic but is still part of the fiction. For example, on The Truman Show there is a fictional world that Truman grew up in, and the show is about the real world that encapsulates Truman in a climate-controlled city in a bubble. In a similar way but still completely different, I am creating a show that has a fictional portion and a real portion and also an actually true portion. For example, the definitions of words in the Wikipedia map on endemic surveillance societies are actually true. To summarize, I am creating a show from the standpoint of the creator and narrator telling a story about their show, and also from the standpoint of the audience members who watch the show. Next on The Messiah. On the show they are having difficulty getting courts to recognize it as official art in the sense that it is not considered child's play. This is a critical thing to get them to recognize, because without this they will increase the dose of mentally disabling drugs that Daniel Hagen is forced to take upon court order. On the show they are having difficulty in reducing the dissociation from Daniel Hagen and to recognize that even though it is not happening to them personally, it is considered a human rights violation to be so criminally negligent about Daniel's rights and will. For example, they say things like "for Daniel" as if there is no moral obligation to assist Daniel. The opera is projected to continue to explore the conceit that is criminal negligence and human rights violations. It is not only conceded to be so criminally negligent and to allow continued violations of Daniel's human rights, but it is also a conceit that has been and will continue to be explored on the show. Please review the literature on psychopathy and realize that it is their egocentrism and conceit that prevents them from reassociating and taking action by reporting criminals to the police instead of continuing to be ensnared by the bystander effect, which is to refrain from helping when large crowds are observing and being critical of a victim.